The grand halls of the White House were alive with the chatter of students visiting as part of a national leadership program. Among them was a young girl named Emily Carter. At just 16 years old, Emily was not only a straight-A student, but also an aspiring lawyer. However, unlike most of her peers, Emily was blind. From birth, she had lived in darkness, but she never let it define her. She excelled in her studies, memorized entire legal texts by heart, and dreamed of making the world more accessible for people with disabilities. But deep down, she knew that achieving such a goal would require more than just intelligence. It required influence, power, and, most importantly, someone to believe in her. As the students gathered in the East Room, an unexpected announcement filled the air. The 45th President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, will be addressing the students personally. A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. No one had expected such a high-profile appearance. Dressed in his signature suit and red tie, Trump entered with his usual confidence. He greeted the students, delivered a few remarks about leadership, and then asked, "Any questions?" A moment of silence passed before Emily, guided by her cane, stepped forward. Her heart pounded, but she knew she had to take this chance. "Mr. President," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion, "I was born blind. Every day, I face challenges that many people don't even think about. I dream of becoming a lawyer and advocating for accessibility laws, but the world is not designed for people like me. What will it take for someone like me to have a real chance at success?" The room fell silent. Some students exchanged glances, wondering how Trump would respond. A few advisors looked tense. But Trump simply studied Emily for a moment. Then, in a rare moment of sincerity, he stepped down from the podium and walked toward her. "Emily," he said, his voice softer than usual, "people have underestimated me my entire life. They said I wouldn't be successful in business. They said I wouldn't win the presidency. But I proved them wrong." He paused. "And you will, too. But here's the deal, you shouldn't have to fight that hard. We should make the world easier for brilliant minds like yours." Then, in front of the entire room, he turned to his team. "I want a full report on disability accessibility in our education system on my desk by next week. And find out how we can support this young lady's dream." Gasps filled the room. Emily, overwhelmed, felt tears stream down her face. She had expected a generic response, maybe some encouragement, but not this. Not action. A week later, Emily received an invitation back to the White House. She was escorted into the Oval Office, where Trump sat behind the resolute desk. He handed her a thick folder. "This," he said, "is a scholarship fund in your name for students with disabilities who want to pursue law. I made some calls. You now have the backing of some of the best legal mentors in the country. And one more thing, you're going to intern at a top law firm next summer." Emily covered her mouth, unable to contain her emotions. "Mr. President, I don't know what to say." Trump smiled. "Just promise me one thing. When you become a top lawyer, you'll fight for others like you. Deal?" She nodded, her hands trembling as she wiped her tears. Deal. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. News outlets picked up Emily's story, calling it a historic moment for disability advocacy. Organizations reached out, offering her opportunities she had never imagined. She was invited to speak at major conferences, where she met influential figures who supported her cause. Months later, Emily was studying at one of the top law schools in the country, fully funded. She spent her nights buried in legal texts and her days working on cases that fought for equal rights. She no longer felt invisible, she was making a difference. Years later, Emily did exactly that. She became a successful lawyer and a national advocate for disability rights. And every time she stood in a courtroom, fighting for justice, she remembered the moment when a single question changed her life forever. But her story didn't end there. One day, while working late in her office, Emily received an unexpected phone call. It was an invitation to return to the White House, not as a guest, but as a keynote speaker at a national conference on disability rights. The moment felt surreal. She had once stood in that very building as a student, filled with hopes and doubts. Now, she was returning as an accomplished attorney. As she stood behind the podium in the same East Room where she had once questioned the president, she looked out at the audience, policymakers, business leaders, and aspiring young students like she once was. She took a deep breath and spoke. A leader isn't just someone in power. A leader is someone who listens, who takes action when no one else does. My journey began with a question, but it didn't stop there. Today, I stand here not just as a lawyer, but as proof that dreams can become reality when people are willing to make a change. And I promise I will dedicate my life to ensuring that no child with a disability feels like they have to fight alone. The room erupted in applause, but one person in particular stood out. Sitting in the front row, Donald Trump nodded, a proud smile on his face. He had seen something in Emily that day: determination, resilience, and an unstoppable fire. And now, the world saw it too. As she stepped down from the stage, a young girl with a cane approached her. "Miss Carter, you inspire me. I want to be a lawyer, just like you." Emily smiled, remembering the words once spoken to her. She placed a hand on the girl's shoulder and said, "Then let's make it happen. I'll help you every step of the way." And just like that, the cycle continued. One act of kindness, one moment of belief, one life changed forever.